Guys, welcome back to my channel. Hope you're all doing well. Now today I've got a very special guest. I'm joined by Tom Canton from the Gooner Talk TV YouTube channel. And Tom, came on my channel I think about 6 months ago when we were talking about the start of the season. So we've got a lot to chat about, and I'm really looking forward to having you on today, Tom. And thank you for coming on. How are you doing?
Yeah, all good. Absolute pleasure as always, and thank you as well for joining me on my show recently too with Laura. It was a fantastic show.
Yeah, it was really good, and like you said, a very important topic, and I'm just grateful for you having me on. And I did want to speak a bit about Arsenal before the Sheffield United game, because at the moment, we just can't stop scoring. Like before Dubai, we went through a bit of a rough patch where we just couldn't score. It seemed like all of our players were lacking confidence at the same time. But honestly, I just love to know your thoughts on this. Like, what do you think happened at Dubai? Like, do you think they just needed a rest from football to have some time away? Because we look like a completely different Arsenal compared to the team before Dubai.
Yeah, it is interesting, isn't it? Like you go away to a hot country and everything's solved. I wish your life was
Your
always
problems
that
were all
simple.
solved.
Indeed, yeah. Ben White's tan was recouped on that trip as well. I think it's important. Erdegaard talked about this yesterday, actually, after the game. He said kind of when I think it was Jamie Carragher that asked him about it, or David Jones, one of them asked him about it, and he said that they just kind of needed a rest. Like they just needed to detach after what was a really frustrating period, I think, when we'd lost those games against West Ham and Fulham and then been knocked out of the FA Cup by Liverpool. But, I spoke to a couple of people at the club and they basically told me that they'd uprooted London Colney, or the Sober Realty Training Centre as it's called now, and kind of lifted up the staff, the equipment. They took the injured players with them. Some of the players took their family members with them. And they just brought basically the entire of their infrastructure in some ways to the facility where they used before. So they knew it was familiar to them. It wasn't like an alien environment. And I think that as well, just to give you a bit of a break in a new environment, to see different things around you does help. So yeah, it's stunning what's happened afterwards. And I don't think anyone predicted that this would happen afterwards, but it goes to show that the benefits of these little trips.
Yeah, I definitely think, players like Saka definitely needed a rest. And I think the whole team, like I said, probably needs a little break from football to come back and refocus. And it is crazy, how many goals we scored, and we're not conceded as many as well. So I feel really happy about that. And obviously the Sheffield United game, I do want to go on that in a minute, but before that game, when you were probably previewing the game, talking about it, did you expect us to kind of score as many goals? Because I know for me, it felt like a very one-sided game. I feel like Arsenal really dominated it, and I was quite surprised that we scored 6 personally.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because you think, when's it going to stop? Like, when's this
Yeah.
run going to stop? Like, when are we going to stop scoring this many goals? And I'm doing all my preview shows, and my guests are coming on saying 4-0, 5-0, 6-0. The chat box is going up to 10-0, and saying things. It's crazy what people are saying as to how much they think we're gonna score. But what I do think is that it's just about momentum. It's just and self belief as well, and it's this idea that it doesn't matter who you're playing. We're just going to play our game. We're going to do what we do best, and that means ultimately playing really attacking football and finishing our chances as well. And I think that if you can build momentum and confidence, and it can become something of even just kind of a second skin to the team as well, where you just kind of enter the game, you forget about what the opposition, who they are, whatever. You focus on what you need to do. And I know that Arteta does loads of work on the opposition, but I can guarantee that the majority of work just goes into doing what we do best, which is obviously attacking really, really well as well. So yeah, I think it's that replication process.
Yeah, it does feel like, these good results, are they going to ever end? Because obviously we're doing really well. We've got a lot of confidence at the moment. And for me in that game, going into it, I did obviously expect us to win comfortably. I said something like 3 or 4-0, but I think it was just really impressive, how we played. Just talk to me for you, what you made of that performance yesterday.
I think the performance was, very akin to what we've been seeing so far. I think that if you want to go down into kind of the individual displays, I think it was one of Kai Havertz's strongest performance, which was great to see. Because any opportunity for him to respond to his critics, which have been plentiful this season, has been great. I think that Bukayo Saka continues his fine form as well, and it seems that even though he was slightly ill going into the game, which is why he was brought off at half time, he was still able to kind of impact things. He should have probably scored, I say should have. It's a hard chance what he has in those opening minutes, but you just think, well, he's at the bar, surely you can hit the target as well. And, I think that if we'd have got that goal that early on in the game, who knows what the scoreline could have been in the end. It ends up being 6-0, and Ben White gets on the score sheet as well. And then by that point, when you're getting your fullbacks to score too, it's becoming... It's just like they're playing attack versus defence in training, because Sheffield United are just, by 15 minutes in, you're 3-0 down, you're thinking it's just damaged imitation. Chris Wilder brought off one of their midfielders. I think Norwood came off if one of their defenders came on, and it didn't really do anything to stop them being as vulnerable as it did. The only thing that really gave them some respite was when we brought on a lot of our players in the second half that needed minutes and needed game time. So, yeah, I think that ultimately, if you're going to bring on players like Partey and Vieira and Jesus, who've not played a lot of football too much, it is going to slow things down. The familiarity between the players isn't going to be as strong. So the performance in the first half was stunning, and very much what we've been expecting from Arsenal. In the second half, I think it slowed, and I think there was legitimate reasons why it slowed.
Yeah, I think obviously the changes in the second half. I think in the second half, at one point in the first half, I did think we could have won like 8-0, but as I knew in the second half, Sheffield United would have been a bit better, and because we did, our performance was just very one-sided, and we were very good in the first half. So I think the second half, I did probably expect it to slow down a little bit, but it was obviously good as well to see a few players that we've not seen for a while, like Vieira, Partey. I know a lot of people have said this, and I kind of agree. I think with Partey, probably wasn't his best game. I think he's been out for so long. He needs time to, come back to himself and get more game time. But I think, like you said, it's obviously a really good game from us. And yeah, I think overall we can be really happy with that. And I know a moment in the game that wasn't really looking good for Arsenal was when Martinelli went off injured, possibly. I mean, he did look like he was in a little bit of pain. I'm hoping it's not, too serious. But if he is injured, do you think this might affect Arsenal this season? Because I know we've got a few more tough games. We've got Man City, United. The games are getting a bit difficult, and it's a very important time now at the season.
Yeah, the Martinelli injury is obviously a frustration, because it's difficult to know how injured he really is. We're told that he got a bit of a cut, which is, I mean, what do you know from that? Players get cuts and scrapes all the time when they're playing football. So how much is that going to affect him playing? Is it going to keep him out? Is it like a cut where we've seen some players that can get really deep, like cuts through studs and things like that, which actually do need, stitches, and it can keep, depending on where that cut is. If it is on your foot, you need to rest that up for some period of time while you allow that wound to heal. So is that going to keep him at the Brentford game? Ultimately, we don't know. We won't know until Mikel Arteta speaks in his press conference a little bit later on this week as well. So I think that from how he spoke about it, it didn't seem too bad. But I think people are focusing in on the first part of the quote, which is that it was a cut, but they're forgetting to focus in on the second part of the quote, which is, we need to see. And he left things very much open. So I don't want to make people worried or anything like that, but I think it's important to just temper kind of your feelings around it being completely fine that he'll be back. Hopefully he will be. And, hopefully that is the case. But, just it's worth not just assuming that everything's going to be all right, because otherwise, what's that famous line? If you expect disappointment, then you'll never be disappointed. So,
yeah, I think we'll just have to see with that. I mean, hopefully he's okay. If he's out for a week or two, I think we can manage. But I know we are getting to an important point of the season where we are getting a few more difficult games coming up. So I do hope he's okay. But talking on the game, Arsenal obviously for me were amazing. We were really good. And I also do think Sheffield United were very poor. I think they were quite... In the first half, I do think they were quite shocking. I think they made it so easy for us. But do you think it was more of Arsenal were really good or Sheffield United are really bad? Or do you think it's kind of a mixture of both?
They are really bad.
They are,
and we are really good. So it's, I absolutely understand why you asked the question, because it's a fair one. I often don't like going down the avenue of, well, they were awful, so that's why we're good. But we put 3 past Liverpool. We put 4 past Newcastle. These are good teams. You've gone to Nottingham Forest, where Liverpool have scraped by the skin of their teeth, a 1-0 win. And it was a lot of fortune that went with that. And we put 2 past them, 5 past Palace, and we'd already beaten Sheffield United 5-0 this season. I honestly think that you could have put most teams in the Premier League in the place of Sheffield United yesterday, and Arsenal were going to win by a big scoreline. The performance dictated that, and whilst they were bad, I think that you can only beat what's in front of you, and you
Yeah.
have to, you have to take the wins as they are, and then I think just analyze what we've done really well, which is to attack well. We've scored our chance. I think the XG was only something like 2.3 or something yesterday, and we've scored 6 goals. So it shows you that we're outperforming that, which some people might say is not sustainable. I just think it shows you that actually our finishing has improved dramatically over the course of this new year. So I think that's something to be excited about.
Yeah, I think, obviously, like you said, I think any team could really have beaten them. But I think, you did make it easy for us. But I also think, Arsenal, it's important to give Arsenal that recognition on their performance, because I think we were really good. And like you said, we've been able to beat Liverpool by a few goals. We've done that with other teams. So I think we're showing we can do it with, some top side as well. Man United this season, we've really done really well. So I definitely think for me, it just shows you the quality of Arsenal. I've got a comment here. Would you stick Trossard or Jesus on the left if Martinelli is injured or not to be risked? Now, that's a good question, because it's hard. Jesus came on the other day and yesterday, and I think obviously he has been out for a little while, but I felt like he looked a bit rusty, like he had a few chances that he couldn't really convert. I know Trossard is good as a substitute and I like him on the pitch, but I honestly don't know. Who would you rather see play on the left if Martinelli's injured?
Well, Jesus apparently was limping a little bit towards the end. He's still not fully fit
Yeah,
yet.
ready.
So if it was a case of both of them were fully fit, then maybe it's a harder question. But I think based upon that, it makes it an easy pick to say Trossard. If it's interesting, because I think Jesus's future may lie in a wider role for Arsenal, especially if in the market in the summer we go out and sign a striker. Depending on what Jesus chooses to do, if he wants to stay and fight, and he did that for many years while Sergio Aguero was at Manchester City, of course. I remember speaking to him about it. I think it was after the Lens home game or the PSV home game, one of them, and I remember asking him about the links to strikers, and he just turned around and said, when I was at City, they were constantly linked with strikers, and I just got my head down, knuckled on, and played as best as he could. And despite the fact that Sergio Aguero was there, he was still there, and Julian Alvarez, of course, came in as well, and he probably had one of his best seasons in his final season for City, and that's why Arsenal signed him. So I think that he would stay at least for a season, even after Arsenal signed a forward. And I do think that there is scope for him to be, a wide option for us. But that knee injury is something that keeps on coming back, and we got to hope that. I think the summer is going to be a really important summer for Jesus to just recover. He's not going away with Brazil this international break, so we'll have 19 days off, which is good. And I think that'll allow hopefully some more time to just to recuperate that issue.
Yeah, definitely. I think, I think at the moment, if he's not 100%, he probably needs to just stay off, not play as much. And when he's ready, he can come off the bench like he did yesterday. But I do agree. I do think, he needs a bit more time to kind of, he has a lot of, since he's been at Arsenal, he's been amazing, but his injuries have definitely made it a lot difficult for him. And unfortunately, that's just the case. Hi guys, when is Martinelli coming back? I think we don't really know anything yet, but if it's not too serious, then you probably might play Obi on the bench in the next game. I think it depends, like you said, how bad the cut is or what the injury is sort of like as well. So yeah, I think we've really got to see what happens with that. But I don't think it would be too serious that it would be out for the rest of the season. But yeah, I feel quite hopeful about that. And obviously, our last goal, Ben White did score. And for me, I really like Ben White. I do think he's really underrated for me because, a lot of the credit will go to other players that, stood out a bit more than him. Do you think he's like a bit underrated as well? Because I know that he doesn't always get that praise that he deserves.
Yeah, he's one of those where I think I'd say 90% of Arsenal fans would say he's underrated. And so therefore you'd say, well, we clearly rate him, we clearly know how good he is. And maybe it's the wider footballing sphere that actually is underrating Ben White. Yeah. His situation with England obviously means that he doesn't play international football. And I don't think, I just can't foresee him playing while Gareth Southgate and his coaching staff are still there. I think it would take a managerial change now for that to switch up unless we see a surprise call up for the next one or for the European Championships. But if there wasn't this underlying issue behind the scenes, then he would be, for me, starting for England in their right back slot, because I mean, who do you have for England on the right wing? You have Bukayo Saka. So why wouldn't you and you've got Declan Rice, in the midfield.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't you combine that Arsenal connection together, that familiarity? Why wouldn't you attempt to bring that all together? And obviously there are reasons that we're not privy to in the public domain too much about why he isn't playing for England. There's there's been plenty of rumours around it, which you can kind of piece certain puzzles together, but in an Arsenal point of view, he just cares about playing for Arsenal at the moment. His focus is very much on playing for Arsenal. He's very happy at Arsenal. He enjoys playing for us, despite his demeanour, despite his interviews that he does. He does really enjoy playing for Arsenal. He does really enjoy playing under Arteta and improving as a player. And I think that he really does actually appreciate Arteta as his coach, and I think he appreciates how he's developed him. And despite the fact that William Saliba came in and everyone was thinking, well, that kind of spells the end for Ben White because William Saliba's come in. Actually, no, he's evolved as a player and moved to this fullback position. And now he's evolved even further in the last few games because Kivior's playing the more traditional left-back role. And now he's inverting from the right-hand side, which is obviously what we used to do with Zinchenko. So he's taken his game to another level in this year, in 2024. So he just keeps getting better. And he's £50 million well spent is what you have to say.
Yeah, definitely. Like, I remember when we bought him, people were saying it's probably too much money, and I think he's absolutely been worth every penny. And like you said, I think for England it would be good to see him, start a few games because, Declan Rice and Saka are there, so why shouldn't Ben White be there? So I do hope that will happen for his future, but I completely agree. I think at the moment he's improving. He always kind of goes under the radar a bit because I think like the Salibas, the Gabriel, Saka will obviously, they're just the players that people probably give the credit to a bit more. But it's obviously really good to see Ben White and Saliba in the same team because I remember when Saliba came back, people were thinking, will one of them be dropped permanently? So I think for me, it's just really lovely to see that they're all there starting. And I know you mentioned about Kivior, and I did want to talk a bit about that because I know Zinchenko, when he's back, it'll be a bit of a difficult decision for Arteta to make. And I very much think that if a player is, playing good enough week in, week out and giving solid performances, you can't really drop them. It would be hard to drop Kivior. I think it would be a bit unfair, but we also know that Zinchenko brings something a bit different to this team and he does really help us. I know there is that option we can play him in midfield, but he always hasn't really played there for Arsenal. When he's back, would you bring Zinchenko in or would you kind of leave things as they are?
I think he has to fight and earn his place back. Kivior has been a fantastic addition into the 11 in the last since the Liverpool game when Zinchenko came off at half time is when Kivior is he started from that point in the second half. We scored 2 goals, won that game 3-1, and he's not looked back since. It's worth pointing out Zinchenko started and played through that 5-0 win over Crystal Palace, so we know that we can also score plenty of goals with Zinchenko in the team too. I think that Kivior's probably surprised the most. I mean, Kai Havertz stands out for many as the biggest surprise.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, he's a £65 million signing that's got Premier League experience, has been playing at the top level for a long, long time, as a Champions League winner, is scoring in the final. Jakub Kivior is, with respect, a nobody. Like, no one knew who he was when we signed him. Just coming from Spezia, a team in Italy where not many people know or watch Spezia week in, week out, playing for, Poland, which is a good national side and certainly have done good things on the international scene for many years in Euros and in World Cups as well. But, defensively, we've never really looked at Poland as a nation. It's usually we look at the forward players like Lewandowski, for instance, or their attacking midfielders like Zielinski, for instance. But Kivior has played regularly for them in a centre-half and in a left-back position. And he's brought that left-back international skill into the Arsenal team. Now, he struggled when he was asked to invert. And I think that Arteta has recognised that when he's asking Kivior, who is by trade a centre-half, although he can play at left-back, when he asked him to play this rather complicated, technically challenging role, it's not going to get... You might get something, but you're not going to get the best from Kivior. And the good manager that Arteta is, and I think it's a trait in Arteta that he's improved in. I think in previous years when he first started out at Arsenal, he was too slow to recognise certain things. But I think actually as he develops as a coach, he's now improving, recognizing things quicker. And I think this was one of those things where he's recognized Kivior shouldn't be the one inverting. And so he's got a more technically gifted defender in Ben White doing that job. So yeah, Zinchenko will have to fight and earn that place back because Kivior's earned that starting spot. And until Zinchenko comes on and has a meaningful game, or Kivior struggles in one game, and we don't need to change it. And I think that, the game's coming up. You've got Brentford at home. I think will come too soon to start Zinchenko. You've got
Yeah.
Porto, where I think having a player like Kivior is going to be important. Maybe Zinchenko coming on in that game where we need to kind of press the advantage in some ways might come in useful in the second half if he's back. And then, of course, Man City away. Now, I'm starting Kivior in that game because I think he would offer us more defensive security than Zinchenko would.
Yeah.
So it's difficult to see where he gets the chance.
Yeah, it's going to be tough for Arteta, and I think at the moment, like with Kivior, I think defensively he has, done really well, and I think people were for me a bit harsh on him at the time because, he's had to play in a position that he's probably not played a lot in, and I think he needed a bit more time to kind of adapt in that position because, Zinchenko really played a lot more than him, so I feel like he just needed a bit of time to settle into that role, and I think, like you said, it's Arteta. It's going to be a difficult decision for him, but I think the tough games that we have coming up, like the Man City, I know we've got United as well, Spurs, I think I'd rather him play in those type of games because I know for me, like with the league, I think these are the games we've really got to win and not make some errors. So I do feel like it'll be interesting to see what Arteta does. Harry has said, how do you feel about Saka's performance? I think yesterday, like you said, with the goal, I think it was hard for him it was a bit of a tight space for him, but I think obviously at the moment his confidence is getting better and better. He's really growing his knee and developing. And I think, we did get to a stage where he was struggling to score goals, and like we've said before with Dubai, they've came back and they're much stronger now.
Yeah, I think Saka's had a really intriguing season where I think he scored he's on for something like 20 goals and assists in both categories is kind of what we're predicting potentially for him to achieve. And I would have said in the first half of the season, in the league in particular, people would have said that he's not having his best season, and that we've seen better. But in the Champions League, he did fantastically well. I think he scored in the majority of the games that he played. Certainly got goal contributions, I think, in every single one of those group stage games, potentially. And then in 2024, since that trip to Dubai, which is, I don't know what they did there again, but whatever happened has been fantastic. I think Saka has been one of those that benefited from that break, that he perhaps was burnt out and that we've seen a response from him. So it's been brilliant to see him respond. And I think that game yesterday in the first half, we saw the best from Saka. He was up against Austin Trusty, who is, I know to Arsenal fans will think, it's Austin Trusty. I mean, he wasn't good enough for Arsenal, but he had a really good season with Birmingham last year on loan, which earned him that move to Sheffield United, where he then made Arsenal a profit with that move. And he is a decent defender, but he's just nowhere near the level of Saka. And so Saka just wrecked him every single time he was going up against him one-on-one. And I think one of the biggest changes to Saka this season is his ability to use his right foot and go onto his right side and then not only cut inside and be dangerous with that shot that we saw against Newcastle, but also the ability to run to the byline and then comfortably get a ball across either by a chip kind of cross the back post, a driven one across the box, which we saw lead to the own goal that Bogle put in obviously last night. He's got so much variation, Saka. He's not predictable anymore, and you don't really know what he's going to do. So that's made him far more dangerous.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think it's just really good to see Saka have his confidence back. And I think, when he scores goals, he keeps getting them. And I think it was hard because when he wasn't scoring, he was really trying to score. And I think I think a lot of our players, like we said before Dubai, they all just probably had a big confidence issue at the same time, and I think that was probably the most tricky thing. But I think Saka's doing really well this season, and I think for me, when he came off in the second half, I think if I'm right in saying Arteta said he was a bit sick, but I think you could really see how different we were without some of our top players in the team. Like Saka, I feel like the energy dropped off a little bit up there, so I think it just shows you kind of what a quality player he is. whether we like it or not, Saka isn't one to pull out of international duty and miss games against Brazil and Belgium unless he has to, yeah. So I think, hopefully Saka will be okay for our next game, but I just think he's a very, very important player. And as we mentioned a bit before about Havertz, I think for me, when we bought him, I think I was going to give it time and see what I think. And obviously, at first, it did go a bit slow with him. He was struggling to score goals. I know, I think Odegaard might have given him that penalty. And I think after the international break, when he was at Germany, I think he just couldn't stop scoring, and he just had this confidence about him. And at Chelsea, he really struggled. He was probably not in the right place for him, the right environment for him. And obviously now he's pretty much scoring most games, and he's just he's got this confidence. He's really enjoying his football. As much as Havertz is doing amazing, but I feel like for me it also shows you about Arteta, about how much he can develop players, because like we saw with Xhaka, when we had that issue with him and with the fans, he literally has came out as a much better player for Arsenal. So do you think that tells you kind of what kind of coach Arteta is?
Yeah, I think that Arteta has grown a lot in the, this is what, his 5th season with us.
Yeah, I
So
think.
yeah, he has grown a lot and developed a lot as a coach, but he's since day one, it's always been about the off-field stuff, the principles, the non-negotiables, the expectations that he has. It's gradually developed, and he's gradually developed his style and his philosophy, and he's gradually changed the team and overhauled it. The only players I think that are still here that he inherited, so the likes, Saliba, of course, he integrated, but was signed prior to his arrival. Youngsters like Bukayo Saka and Smith Rowe, of course, were still here and were making their debuts under Unai Emery, but he's established them and turned them into the players that they are today. And he's brought through our captain in terms of Martin Odegaard. He's been able to convince the likes of Declan Rice to choose us over Manchester City. His presence, despite being still a very young and early coach in his career, is of a level that I don't think many people expected it to reach so soon. And yet, I say so soon. 5 years is a long, long time in football, and it still does feel like yesterday that Arteta took over, rather strangely. But I know for maybe a lot of younger fans like yourself as well, it feels like a lot longer because it's a longer portion of your lifetime. But I do feel like it was just yesterday that he was taking over, from Unai Emery or Freddie Ljungberg, it was in that interim period, and that now being here for as long as he has been and establishing himself, he was always for me in that category of coaches, especially last season, below Klopp and Guardiola. But without question, he is one of those coaches that has the potential, if he succeeds, if he wins trophies, if he can establish Arsenal as a title-winning side, that can break into that bracket of the elite coaches that are out there. I think he's top in terms of where he's at. But is he going to break that world-class elite level bracket of coaches? This season could be the first step towards that. Certainly the new contract, if and when, and it is a case of when more than if he signs that new deal, that next deal has to be the one where he delivers. Because if he doesn't deliver a title or a Champions League in that next contract, rightfully people will be asking the question, is this as far as Arteta can take us? If Arsenal are going to compete with Manchester City and Liverpool in the future, or anybody else like Chelsea and United, if they get their what together, I think that it will ask the question about whether Arsenal need to bring in another coach to take them to that next level. But I really feel as though Arteta has got the potential to be able to do that himself. And I certainly hope that he is the guy, because it means we would have been doing it quicker, which is more important.
Yeah, I agree. I think for me, I'm really happy with how things are going. I think we're challenging, we're able to compete with teams like Man City and Liverpool and even beat them at the Emirates. So I think we're definitely going in the right direction. I think, obviously, in the last couple of seasons when we were trying to get top 4, I think last season, I feel like it was definitely a good season. I think even though we missed out, I feel like it's more positive than negative. So, but there is that issue about us not getting over the line, and that, I think Arteta has needed time to bring in his right players, and I think a lot of the players he's brought in have actually done really well. We've had the odd one, obviously, but it does happen. But I think, you know, there is that discussion whether or not he can take us over that line, but I don't think it's all on him really. I know that players, you know, hold that responsibility as well, but it's really good to see how much he can improve players in the team. Like, I think Havertz has been absolutely incredible. He's grown so much, and I think a lot of people are really starting to see, you know, his quality and are a bit sorry that they ever doubted him. I think he's I think he's doing really good, which is obviously amazing. And I did want to ask you about from the game, because a lot of people's player of the match was so different. I mean, it's quite hard to decide because there were so many, but who would you say your standout player from the game was?
I said at the start, I thought that Kai Havertz had his best performance, which is a big compliment. But I still just can't get over how good Martin Odegaard is. Like, did you remember the pass he played to Martinelli? That was just, it was like he was shooting from the halfway line, and Martinelli's the goal, and he just hits this ball with such perfection and such pace and weight and, you know, direct. It was such a straight arrowed pass. It wasn't like these floated balls over to the wide areas. It was an arrow through the Sheffield United team. I was hoping that would lead more so to a better chance. But I think that his technical ability, his vision, his goal scoring, of course, as well. He gets into those positions. Everyone likes to call it the ozone now, which I do like. But his leadership is the key aspect for me that I think has come on leaps and bounds. There were so many questions when he got that armband about whether he was the right choice. Because I think if you'd have polled Arsenal fans at the time who they'd want, I think Kieran Tierney probably would have won the poll for that captaincy, other than Granit Xhaka if he wasn't involved in it, perhaps because of the controversy he had with the captain's armband. And you look at where Tierney is now, and you look at where Odegaard is now. You know, it's night and day. You know, Tierney's off on loan because he can't get into Arteta's team, and he'll probably leave on a permanent deal in the summer. And Odegaard is probably the first name on Arteta's team sheet every single game. His pressing is like nothing else. Like, he just runs for days. Like, he just never runs out of energy, and he speaks so well. You know, and he's absolutely brilliant bloke as well. I cannot speak any more highly of Martin Odegaard as a person. And what he's like. I always maintain, you know, from a journalist point of view, I empathise with players that they aren't that keen on speaking to us. I get it. Like, you know, you finished the game, you want to just go home and chill with your other halves and your family, and probably get away from football somewhat. So I'm always very appreciative when the players do take the time out to speak to us. And at the end of last season, even though we'd not won the league, Odegaard took the time to come out to the press area and just shake the hands of every single one of the journalists and just thank us for covering the club that season. It just kind of shows the class that he exudes. So yes, Odegaard for me yesterday was the standard.
Yeah, I agree. I think there was quite a few. I think, you know, Havertz as well did really well. I think he got 2 assists and obviously scored that goal. And it's obviously a difficult one because there were so many standout performers. But I think, like you said, with Odegaard, like with the captain situation, you know, back then when it happened, I originally had Tierney and Gabriel, you know, being the captains. Like, I didn't really
love the Gabriel shout. I love that.
Yeah, I could always see him as a captain. You know, I'd probably still do as like a second or third option. I think as well, Declan Rice could be a future captain as well. So we've got quite a few leaders in there. But like, I was happy to see Odegaard as the captain. I think he just wasn't my first option, but I think, like I said, a lot of people probably wouldn't have picked him as at number 1. But I think he's just doing such a great job, and even though like he probably hasn't scored as many goals this season, I just think when he's in the team, he really controls things. He really makes a difference. So I do feel as though like he makes that impact, and I think like he's the perfect captain for Arsenal. And like you said, you know, we probably didn't know at the time Tierney would have gone out on loan because he was so happy here. But I know for me, it's just really lovely to see, and I'm glad you're all enjoying the show as well. It's been a very long time. We've had numerous captain choices in the first team. Yeah, I think it just shows you the quality of the team, really, because I think if you asked me maybe 5 years ago, who would you want a captain to be, I probably wouldn't have many options. So it's good that we've got this, you know, we've got so many leaders in the team.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I remember back in the day, there was I remember, I think it was early 2010s, where we had like Vermaelen, who was the Belgian captain. Ramsey was the Wales captain before Williams took it over. We had loads of others. I think it's a long time ago. I'm trying to think back to what it was, but there was other like players in that team that we had that were just there was several captains of different. I think Yossi Benayoun was on loan. And I think he was the Israel captain as well at the time. So yeah, we had loads of these captains, but we didn't have a team that I felt had standout leaders necessarily in it. But
Yeah.
now we really, really do, and that's great to see.
It's so lovely, isn't it? Like, I
Mm.
think it's obviously really good to have that option. So, yeah, I'm really happy with that. And I did want to talk about a bit about Saliba, Gabriel defensively, because obviously, you know, Liverpool have got Van Dijk, and obviously Man City are really good doing that. And we haven't really conceded many. Like, I feel like whenever, you know, a team is going on attack, I feel like really comfortable that we'll do well. I know Raya's come in as well. I know Raya has, you know, done a few questionable things, but recently, in the last maybe month or so, he's obviously grown in confidence. Do you think defensively we are the best in Europe, or do you feel like we need to win things to kind of prove how good we are defensively?
Well, I think you can talk about a team in terms of form. And I think in terms of form, we probably are the best defensive sides in the world at the moment. You know, if you look at the XG numbers, XG Philosophy is a really good account to follow on Twitter. They said Arsenal have conceded an average of 0.31 XG across their last 7 league matches. And for reference, Manchester City's is 0.91 and Liverpool's is 1.35. So, you know, Arsenal's is just under a third of Man City's and is just under, I think, a fifth of Liverpool's, which is mental statistics. Which, if you're David Raya, you're buzzing because he's not
Yeah.
facing too many shots. But when he is being challenged, you know, he does make some key saves. I think it was Almiron he faced a one-on-one against in the Newcastle game. There was a shot he had to save last night as well. I can't remember who it was that had the effort, but he had to get down low. I think he was also offside in that moment, but he still got down well and saved it. He's made some big saves this season. I think about the Tottenham game where he clawed his way across the goal to think it was stop Kulusevski or Son or somebody in the middle from no, I think it was Brennan Johnson actually he stopped on the day. But when there's always been this undercurrent of Aaron Ramsdale in the first half of the season, but since the turn of the year, that conversation has just stopped, you know, and that's a good
Yes.
thing. I do feel for Ramsdale. I have a lot of empathy for Ramsdale because why wouldn't you? He's a great bloke, you know,
Yeah.
and didn't necessarily deserve to lose his place so quickly in the Arsenal team, but if you want to be a ruthless side that wins things, if you want to keep on progressing and going in one direction, you need to realize that you can't have, you know, you can't have your favorites necessarily. You can't just pick somebody because you like them the most. David Raya, I think, is
Yeah.
a slightly better goalkeeper than Ramsdale. I think, especially for his delivery and his distribution and his timing of his throws and, you know, his ambition to basically be an additional defender, he is that level above. Ramsdale may be a slightly better
Yeah.
shot stopper, but if you're Arsenal Football Club, is a goalkeeper playing more passes or is he making more saves? And
Yeah.
they're playing more passes. So you want the goalkeeper that's better at that than the goalkeeper that's necessarily slightly better, maybe at the goalkeeping aspect of it.
Yeah, I think they're very different, aren't they? I think I've said
Mm.
it's hard to kind of say who's better because I've always been a big fan of Ramsdale. I think he's not really done anything wrong to be out the team, but I suppose Arteta's wanted to make improvements, and I think Ryan is proven to be a really good goalkeeper. I think he got a bit nervous in a few. You know, I know the Chelsea game, I think there were a few games where he had a few difficult moments, but I think his distribution as well is what I absolutely love about him. And I think he's definitely improving. And yeah, I think, you know, Arteta for me has made his mind up about it. So I think all we can do right now is to support that. And I do think, you know, Raya is doing really good and we're in a really good place with him at the moment. And I did want to speak a bit about this with Smith Rowe because obviously, we knew in the second half we've got those 3 points, so I wasn't too fussed who we brought on in the second half. But obviously, you know, a lot of fans weren't happy. Smith Rowe not getting minutes, and I think Trossard and Vieira
Mm.
got minutes over him, and I was happy with that, obviously. But people aren't really happy. I know for me, I like Smith Rowe. I know he's just had another injury, so it'd be good to see him get minutes. But do you read into it like maybe he'll be going in the summer, or do you just think Arteta just wants to bring him back slowly so he doesn't get injured again?
Yeah, I literally just finished writing an article about this because it's like so many people that rightfully were asking the question about why didn't Smith
Yeah,
Rowe come on, and I think you can explain every single sub. You know, Vieira needs minutes, Partey
yeah,
needs minutes, Gabriel Jesus needs minutes. Cedric was our only defender on the bench, and Ben White has been suffering with a knee issue at the end of last year that has thankfully, you know, seemingly gone away. But you want to manage his minutes as much as you can. So, and Cedric being at the moment the only fit defender, if he's called upon and we have a crisis, you want to have made sure that he's got minutes, you know, at times as well. So he came on. And then the last one that is probably the most contentious that you could argue is Trossard. Now, for me, Trossard is like our 12th player. If you were to say Arsenal's best 11, Trossard's probably the 12th player on the list. He's the first one that would come in for any of the, you know, the players that you might leave out. And he often does come on as the first sub in most games, especially when Arsenal want to change things from the bench. So you need to keep him sharp and you need to keep giving him minutes. And he deserves minutes based upon what he's done, perhaps more so than Smith Rowe has. I liked Smith Rowe's performance against Nottingham Forest, but when he has been given opportunities from the bench, he's not really necessarily impacted games.
yeah.
I don't think that game is indicative of, I don't think we can take anything from that game and think, yes, that is the answer. We now know that Smith Rowe's either staying or going. I think he probably does need to go from his perspective.
Yeah.
He needs to play football. He's at a really important age of his career, and he has a massive connection to Arsenal. He loves Arsenal, but he needs to love his career more than the
Yeah.
club that he necessarily loves. And so if a Villa or a Newcastle or somebody comes in, whilst it'll be painful to see him go and start and play and potentially score and maybe even prove Arteta wrong if he does those. But the context we have right now is that he's not playing. It's a lot of money for a player to sit on the bench and not be an option if Arteta doesn't see him as an option. And so I think Arsenal should be looking to try and get a very, very good fee and then reinvest that in somebody that Arteta does want to use more often on the bench.
Yeah, I think, like you said, I think for him, I could understand if he left in the summer, I wouldn't be annoyed at him. I'd be, disappointed it didn't work out. But we know if he left, he still loves Arsenal and that won't ever change. But I think for him, with players that we've got now, it's going to be hard for him to get time as well. And if Arteta doesn't really see him as that, it'll be a difficult one. But I think because he's had injuries as well, I don't think Arteta wants to rush him back as well. But he could have played him for maybe 10 minutes. So I think we'll just have to see kind of what happens with that. And I know someone else has asked about Partey as well, because it is an interesting one for me about if Partey is here to stay. Like, I very much said that in the summer, I'd be open to selling him because I think with his injuries, I think it does really affect our season, and obviously he can't help it. It's just how his body deals with the Premier League and how fast it is. But I do also feel like, he gets injured like so often. It's like really, it does affect us, because if we could bring someone else in that could, manage more minutes than him. But I do think it'd be hard to find a replacement for Partey, because I think he's just such a great player. Like, a lot of people do put him up there with Rodri. Like, it's a really tough one. But for you, in the summer, would you be open to selling him?
Yeah, I think you have to be a player that's on £200,000 per week and that has perhaps a value of around £15 million, maybe more, with a 1 year left on his contract. If you get a good offer, I think you have to look to try and accept that. We don't know what he's going to produce between now and the end of the season. He could be unbelievable and then make us change our minds, and that's fine. Football fans need to be more open-minded to be able to change their view on things. But I think the reality is Arsenal will look for a midfielder in the summer, and we've been linked to players like Martin Zubimendi, for instance, who I think would be a good acquisition for the club. But yeah, it's a really simple one. It's a short one. He's just too injured too often, and you need to have players in a squad that are going to challenge for a title year on year that you can rely on to be fit for the majority, if not all, of the year.
Yeah, I agree. I think like you said, you do have to be open to it, because if they're not fit for like most of it, the majority of it, I think it's not going to help us. And I think for them, it'd probably better for them to play somewhere else that they can, manage their fitness as well. But yeah, I did want to also speak on the league because obviously, Man City and Liverpool are playing at the weekend. I know we've got Man City at the end of the month, but obviously the back of, a really good result against Sheffield United. How are you feeling about the league? Because I know I think we're a point behind Man City, 2 behind Liverpool. Are you confident that we can win the league? Because I feel like a lot of people have kind of underestimated us really in the title race.
Yeah, a lot of people have. They've kind of built it as a 2-horse race for most of the season and just think Arsenal will fall away, but we haven't. And now I think we look like we're playing the most entertaining, the most dangerous, threatening football in the league as well, which gives, I think, the most momentum. And I think any team that's is looking at their fixture list, whoever has Arsenal next, I think, is fearing that more than any other game, because I think Man City are gettable. I think Liverpool are incredibly fortunate, to have the points they have.
And especially when they scored right at the end against Nottingham Forest, it just really annoyed me.
Yeah, it sucks, but it's the reality, sadly, of the situation. I think that Arsenal are just taking things one game at a time. The thing is, for all the good that we are doing, for all the brilliance that we are showing, you lose to Brentford, and toys are out the pram and meltdowns are out, because we shouldn't be doing that. We shouldn't be losing to Brentford, but it is football and anything can happen.
Yeah.
So Brentford beat City twice last season, I think. So it's and I really hope that it doesn't, and there'll be a massive inquest if it does. But we are only ever one result away when you're in a title race from falling out of things very quickly. So we just have to keep winning. And if we do win at the weekend, we'll be top for a day, maybe. So yeah, we'll just have to wait and see.
Yeah. I mean, I think this season, obviously, it's very different because last season we were at the start and we were like 10 points ahead of Man City, and it just felt like this was our time. And this season we're a bit behind. Do you prefer being like the team at the top, kind of it's yours to lose, or do you kind of like catching up? Because I think, I do see Liverpool, Man City dropping points for the rest of the season because obviously they play each other, and I know Man City have got Spurs, and I think with that one it's always a bit of a one. It's like their bogey team where they just struggle. So do you prefer being in the position we are right now? Would you rather be where we are last season?
Oh, I'd rather have an 8-point buffer. I
Yeah.
really would. I was asked this earlier on a radio station. Where would you rather be?
Yeah.
You would rather have the buffer. You would rather be leading the league by 8 points. That's just, and I know I get, and I use the analogy of chasing might suit us better, etc., etc. But the reason why we didn't win the league last season is because we lost Tommy Asu and Saliba in the same game and didn't get them back, and so we were more fragile defensively, and teams could get at us, and we lost our momentum. Which this season, we're getting players back instead, which is a really exciting prospect. But offer me an 8-point lead, I'm taking that all day long. So yeah, it's tougher technically to win the league this season because we don't have that lead, and we're chasing and we're relying on others to drop points. And it's at the moment it's out of our hands, because even if we win the rest of our games, Liverpool could win the rest of their games because we don't play them, and they could win the league. So until they drop points, until Man City drop points, and I think we're going to have to beat Man City if we want to win the league. I don't think a draw's enough. I think we have to beat Man City if we want to win the league, and probably win every game if we want to win the league. That's probably what it's going to take.
Yeah, I've said, I think, obviously, it depends as well on the result with Man City and Liverpool this weekend, but if, Liverpool did drop, if it was a draw, obviously that helps us a lot. And I do think if we beat Man City, I think I'm probably more confident we can win the league. I think that's where we can win the league at that game, because I think obviously being at the Emirates would have been better because it's away. It's a little bit more difficult, and we know Haaland and De Bruyne are just absolutely on fire at the moment. So I think it is going to be a tough game. But as like you said, I think if we won that, I think we can. We've got a really good chance of winning the league. But it's going to be hard for Liverpool to drop points because they'll just have like the Nottingham Forest game as well. They can just have a moment of magic and then get those 3 points. So I think as well, Klopp's last season, I definitely think that might give them a bit more motivation to kind of do it. So I do think it makes it a lot more difficult. And I know we mentioned a bit about Ramsdale before. I know for me he has been linked to AC Milan, obviously West Ham, and he's not been getting that game time, and I don't see him getting any more game time. Do you reckon we'll sell him in the summer to maybe one of these teams?
Yeah, I think he'll push to go, and I think that I think he'll want to stay here. He's only just had a baby. It's worth pointing out.
Yeah,
So I don't think he'll want to go necessarily abroad unless there's a really good opportunity that comes up that you just can't say no to.
yeah.
But yeah, I think that he will push to go, and I think we'll look to make a good amount of profit on him.
Yeah, I think obviously it'll be a bit sad to see him go because I feel like he had so much potential. And I did actually think at one point he could be a legend in the future. So
Mm.
it is obviously sad that it didn't work out. But I do wish him well, and I think we'll always have that love for Ramsdale for me. So I think with the league, I think it's going to be really interesting to see how it goes. And I know like a lot of fans at the start of the season, and a few now. I mean, because we're winning, not many people will speak about Arteta or question him because we're all happy. But has been a few seasons we've not really won anything, and I know last season we got so close, and I think the majority of fans are really happy. I know we didn't get over the line, but I just think a lot of fans felt proud of how far we've come. And I know this season, if we don't win the league, I know a lot of people might question Arteta about, like we mentioned before, if he can't get across the line. And say next season comes and we wish we weren't able to win anything again, but we're still competing. Do you feel like Arteta should stay at Arsenal? Because there also isn't a lot of managers out there, and I think you've really got to find a manager who you'd actually want to bring in if you did want to sell him or like move him on. So what would you think if that happened next season?
I think obviously it always depends upon how you get to that place. So it's one thing to say it hypothetically; it's another thing for it to
Yeah,
actually happen and then see, because who knows, you could have lost like all your players to injury. You could have got incredibly unlucky, or you might have missed out by a single point. And it does heavily matter about how you get to there. But as I mentioned before, I think Arteta deserves a new contract, no matter what happens
yeah,
this season. I think he deserves a new, unless we lose every game, then we might have
yeah.
some
Unless it all falls apart.
exactly. So if you were to finish outside the top four, for instance, then you're asking some big questions at that point, how you would even get there. But I think that he deserves the new deal, and the next deal is about delivering that title. If we don't do it this season, it's about delivering that title in that next contract, whether that's the
Yeah,
Premier League or the Champions League. I think he has to deliver that, because that's what we're building towards. That's what we're investing in. And so I think if and as you said, equally, it's not just about, is it right to move him on? Is there somebody out there that you can bring in that you think is going to do a better job than Mikel Arteta? And that is an
yeah,
incredibly tough question. It's not like when Arsenal were 8th and trying to
mm,
replace Unai Emery. You're looking to bring in a coach that's not getting us back into Europe, because there's a lot of very decent coaches that could get Arsenal into Europe. The question you're asking is, who is going to take us to a title? And that has only been achieved by 3 managers in the last, since 2016, when Ranieri won it with Leicester. It's
yeah.
7 years, 3 managers, which are Pep Guardiola, Klopp, and Antonio Conte. So it's very, very tough to see who on earth you get to do that.
It's hard as well because I think if in the future, if people decided Arteta couldn't get us across the line, I feel like you've got to have someone in mind who you think you could bring in, because I
Mm.
think Arteta's a really good manager. I think he has made mistakes this season. I think he will still make mistakes, because he probably doesn't have the experience that like maybe a Klopp might have, but he is still a really good manager, and we can't take that away from him. But I think if we get across the line, I think that's what would be good to see. And I hope next season we can win some silverware. And it's been really lovely to chat with you today, Tom. And before we do go, I just wanted you to tell people who obviously will probably know you obviously on here, but just to tell people a bit about your channel and what sort of stuff you do.
Yeah, well, I'm the Arsenal football writer at Football.London, and I cover Arsenal, of course, with the Gooner Talk, which is the YouTube channel, which we do a show every single day at 8 a.m. For those that would like to tune in. It's because I'm mad, and because I'm a morning person, so I can do that. But yeah, it's great. We've got an amazing community. But thank you, Sophie, for having me on. Always an absolute pleasure.
Oh, you're always welcome. It's always lovely to chat with you about Arsenal, and I hope you guys that have watched this have really enjoyed it, because I have. It's been really good to chat a bit about the game, about Arsenal and the season. But yeah, I hope you all enjoyed the video. Please do hit the like button for me. Please do subscribe, and I'll see you all in my next video. Bye.